welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about a wide variety of issues that face residents in Milford. And one of the people that really works hard to help us out. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Good evening, Al. Good to be here as always. I'm Brian Murray, the state representative for the 10th Worcester District, which is the town of Milford, Mendon, and Hopedale.
So you got rid of the one street in Medway?
Yes. With the redistricting, the numbers grew. The way it works is a house district, you have to have between 40 and 44,000 people. You can't go over that 44,000. So when the redistricting rolls around every 10 years, the redistricting committee looks at the demographics and see where growth is. We had some growth, certainly in Milford, and I think Mendon and Hopedale, so that my numbers were over that. And I had previously had Precinct 1 in Medway, and that got taken away from me, and it was given to Mike Soda, the representative out of Bellingham, who also has Uxbridge, because he actually needed to fill in some numbers. So, yeah, it's a confusing process, and it only happens once every 10 years.
I thought it was a great deal. We trade one street and we get two representatives instead of one. So
that's the district.
Beginning of the year, the budget, well, we're middle of the year for you.
Yeah.
The budget is coming up, and that seems to be the big attention getter.
Well, it is, and you know, it's not too different from what happens on the local level. So right now, you're kind of on parallel tracks, monitoring your fiscal year 24 budget, which is the present budget and ends June 30th, but at the same time looking ahead towards fiscal year 25, which starts on July 1st. And that's kind of the point we're at right now. At the state level, revenues are monitored very closely bi-monthly, half month and at the end of the month. And the tracking for the present fiscal year right now, the revenue is not growing as great as was anticipated when the budget was formulated. And right now, we're looking at a shortfall of not necessarily the budget, but the revenue that was projected of about $700 million plus. And that's a big number. We're talking about a $56 billion budget, but that's where we're at right now. And that actually precipitated the governor from making what we refer to as 9 C cuts, which are unilateral decisions that the governor can make mid-year in a budget cycle, and we've experienced them over the years in Milford a number of times. And she did that this past, I think it was right after the holidays. So there have been some cuts, some of the earmarks that all of us got for our districts. Those were essential. Some of them, a good number of them, were cut in half, and a number of other line items were adjusted in this budget year to try to get the expenditures in line with the actual receipts.
But now you're in the middle of the year. If you've spent to your budget, the governor calls you and says, I'm going to cut $700 million. That's like a $1.4 billion cut for 6 months, right?
Well, it could be, and of course, and as you know, the longer the year goes, the tougher it is to make those cuts, because chances are funds have either been spent or
people have been hired.
Close to being spent, right.
So where did the governor go with cuts? Because I heard that we were going to be protected with our school and our municipal allotments.
Yeah, it was not anything to local aid. It was not anything on Chapter 70 money. Those are still in place. It was a number of, kind of peripheral allocations that had been made, and Also, I'm trying to think for a second, I think there was a drawdown of some interest. It was basically some different moves at this point, to try to, get those numbers more to meet.
But 700 million, that's a big number.
Well, it is. It is. And it's not where you want to be midway through your fiscal year. There's no question about it. Revenues are growing in the Commonwealth. They're just not growing as great as was anticipated when the budget was formulated.
But now we get word that she's making cuts, and everybody starts to wonder where. I mean, Chapter 70 money, thank God, she has said that she's not going to cut that. Because, like, for Milford, with all the new kids coming in, we'll talk about immigration later, it could mean $6-7 million in additional expense this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, the Chapter 70, that's been untouched. That's not something that was looked at all. And, depending upon the level of cuts that may occur later on, and we have no indication that there are, because, we have a large, in Milford we call it a stabilization account. The state has a very large reserve account, the largest it's ever been in history. It's up to $8-9 billion. There are some other smaller, again, reserve or stabilization accounts that, I think that she's going to be targeting and looking towards there. So I think there's quite a few steps to go before you think about any, further reductions.
Yeah, I mean, we were pleased. Thank you, Brian and Becca, for fighting for additional Chapter 70 money. Because 2 years ago, when the school committee came back and said, we need our normal 2-point-some-odd% increase, but we also need $6 million in incremental expenses. It took a minute to digest that number.
Yeah.
Luckily, you came through at $7 million 2 years ago and $7 million last year. And the rumor is we'll get $8 million incremental this year.
Yeah, and again, the governor's going to present her budget actually tomorrow, and so that'll be the first time that the House can look at it. And then from that point, the Ways and Means Committee will have our budget hearings, and then we'll look to put together a House budget, again, all prospective of fiscal year '25, and we'll be looking to put together our House budget that last week in April. So, when you reference the funding to the Milford Public Schools, that was all part of the Student Opportunity Act, and that was a large influx of resources particular to districts that have similar demographics to Milford. A large SPED population, large low-income population, and a large English language learners population. I mean, Milford hits on all three. So, and actually I was talking to the representative from Leominster today as well. We were together on a briefing, and we were talking about our school systems because we share similar demographics. And Leominster as well has been benefiting from the Student Opportunity Act. So I think it was thoughtful legislation, it was long overdue, and it was in recognition of systems like ours that have a lot of pressures on them.
Well, you had brought up the term gateway towns.
Sure, yeah.
Because everybody thinks of gateway cities, and they forget that Milford at 30,000 people has a lot of the same problems as a New Bedford or a Fall River.
Exactly. We struggle with a lot of the same demographics. We don't get that gateway city title, but we sure as heck should because we have that large immigrant population, a lot of English language learners, and then a lot of the low income demographic that we have in town. So there's a large amount of that in the town. We're coping with it.
I was amazed when I found out that over 55% of our high school kids qualify for free lunch. Now, everybody gets free lunch anyway,
Right, right.
but to qualify, I think it was like $34,000, family of four.
Yeah.
That's got to be a challenge.
There are a lot of kids coming to school where, and you speak to Carla Tuttle, who does a great job with the food service program, but there's a lot of kids coming to school where that's the only place that they can count on, getting a square meal. You've got a lot of kids coming to school that are in homeless situations. That puts a lot of stress on the system, as well as the students and the family. The free lunch program was something that we funded last year fully. The federal government started it during COVID and then stopped. The state picked it up, and it's been a very, very popular program. It's something that the schools have told us is very, very valuable. The cost, I think, is between $175 and $200 million per year, but boy, it's going to be awful tough to try to not fund that because it has proven to be a godsend for a lot of districts.
Well, a lot of it too is it takes the stigma away from the kid having to hold some kind of ticket or voucher and go up. I mean, you remember in school it was hard enough your everyday trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
To then be labeled well, one of those poor kids, which we never knew what it meant, but didn't sound like a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember my days on the school committee, and even before Collar took over, the food service department periodically would have to come to the school committee because they had collection issues, and it was difficult to try to get certain families to make payments, and you had to wrestle with all of that, which really is not something that schools ought to be dealing with.
Well, the tough part is you don't really know why mom or dad didn't send in the $2. But you got a hungry kid. And I just can't imagine. And if anybody you could trust with having the kids' welfare first in their mind, it's Carla.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when was it the Reagan era where they said ketchup is a vegetable? Somehow I don't think you'd ever get it past Carla that she's going to feed ketchup as a vegetable.
No, I don't think that's going to fly. We're kind of spoiled in Milford. We've got a really good food program that, a lot of school districts don't have.
Well, see, in that, I remember when Carla came with her emergency request that the freezers had fallen apart. And she needed 80 grand for freezers. When we found out what she does with them all year round, even in the summer.
That's right.
Because, like you said, the meals sometimes at school are the only stable source of food a kid gets. Well, what happens when they're not going to school?
That's right. Yeah, no, the summer meals program, the school system partnering with the YMCA, that, too, has been a huge boost to the area and a godsend to a lot of needy families. And really, again, a credit to Carla and the food service for being willing to pick up that work, that job, and really making it happen.
Now, you mentioned the budget. And it's always we hear there's a Senate, there's a House budget, there's a governor's budget. How does that all work? How does it come together?
Yeah, so what happens is, and again, the governor is going to be submitting her budget tomorrow, and this is the second year of this particular legislative term, so her bill is going to get labeled House 2. Last year it was labeled House 1 as it came in at this time period. So we'll get that budget this month. February and March are times where the Ways and Means Committee can get a chance to really dig into it, go through it. Public hearings will be set up with a lot of the different stakeholders, all of the different state agencies and departments, as well as interested advocacy groups, including, obviously municipalities as a stakeholder. And we will solicit requests from our cities and towns as to what they might require, which is commonly known as an earmark. The House then meets for budget week, which is our marathon sessions. That's when you get there at 9 or 10 in the morning.
And you're burning the midnight oil.
Oh yeah, we're there. You're there late at night. A lot of the Western Mass reps, they'll get hotel rooms because you don't want to be driving back at 1 in the morning.
And then coming back the next morning.
And then come back the next day, because it'll last essentially the week. And there'll be a number of amendments to the budget. Usually it's about 1,500 amendments that come out of the House on our budget, and we have to spend that week going through all of those amendments.
1,500 amendments.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's about 1,500 amendments.
How do you even have time to read
well,
1,500 documents?
We don't. We submit the amendments, and then, the Ways and Means team goes through all of them and then presents them out with recommendations as to how to go forward.
Now, the Ways and Means, that's like our version of the FinCom.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And we have a hard enough time going through 40 articles in the town meeting.
Right. So what happens is the amendments get grouped, and I'm trying to think, there's like 9 or 10 groups. Public safety, education, public health, government, that kind of stuff. So the amendments would all get grouped in those areas, and then they get issued as a consolidated amendment. So all of the ones that deal with education will be put out as a consolidated amendment, and Ways and Means will make recommendations as to favorable or unfavorable on them, and then any member, of course, who has presented a particular amendment can choose to go along with that or bring it to the full floor for a discussion and a vote. So you have your own amendments that you file, amendments that get brought to your attention to support or not support, you obviously pay attention to. And then you go through the consolidated amendment process. Ultimately, by the close of that week, hopefully, we come up with a budget. And by the end of April, the House has done its budget, and then it goes to the Senate. And essentially, the Senate, I'm trying to think, I think they work on their budget second or third week in May, somewhere around there.
So are they starting with the House budget?
Yes.
So they're not doing up a de novo budget all by...
Well, it's the Senate budget, but they've already had the governor's budget to work off of, the House budget to work off of, and then they will come up with their own budget based on those line items and numbers and that sort of thing. So the idea on that is to get that done before, Memorial Day. Then there's a conference committee that's set up between the House and the Senate. There's 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and they work to resolve the differences in the House and Senate budget, ideally to get that all done and to the governor for her signature before June 30th.
Now, the incentive there is that they have to have a balanced budget by June 30th.
Right. So it extends, like last year, for example, it went on for, I think, a month or 2 afterwards. So when you go past June 30th, then we pass what's called a 1/12th. So it's essentially a budget for the month of July.
One month at a time.
Yeah, exactly, while you're going through that conference process. And then, of course, the governor, she could have budget vetoes, which, both chambers have to then take up, to finalize the budget.
Could we do that in Washington?
They're exactly. Yeah,
I mean, the idea of having a balanced budget,
Yeah, Congress that's a whole other issue. It's just really disappointing to see, the inaction, the inactivity, the gamesmanship, the showmanship that's going on down there. It's really disappointing.
Well, I don't know if anything scares me more than the far left than the far right, because both of them spouting dogma, in my mind, aren't looking out for our best interest.
I agree. The extremes on both ends are very dangerous. It's almost like, well, it is. Compromise is a dirty word. God forbid if you talk to someone from another party and try to come up with an agreement, all of a sudden, whatever extreme it is, they're all over you.
You're banned because you talk to somebody across the aisle.
Yeah, which is totally antithetical to our form of government, which is predicated on, different ideas coming together, compromise, and then moving forward. And somehow along the way, we've gotten away from that at the federal level. We haven't at the state. It's probably a little bit more difficult, but in Massachusetts, we do work together well. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, progressives.
Is there a choice? There's what, 12 Republicans?
No. The House, they have about, I don't know, 20 or 30. They got
They got two dozen.
They got about 30, I think, 30 or so.
But the one thing that's always made me feel good, and I get criticized for saying it, but I have a hard time distinguishing or telling what a conservative Democrat, Massachusetts Democrat, versus a liberal Massachusetts Republican. I feel proud that
right, and
it's
that's
the same.
And that's a very good point, and that really transcends Democrats and Republicans. It's more ideological beliefs. So, like you say, you've got progressives, you've got conservatives, and those philosophies tend to work together more in Massachusetts, and it's not so much a Republican Democrat thing here. Certainly not like it is across the country and in Washington.
Well, no, before Becca was Ryan, Republican.
Yes.
And yet the two of you somehow, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. You were both fighting for Milford.
Oh, absolutely. And we work together on bills. And now, obviously, he has thoughts on certain things, and I have thoughts on certain things, and we don't necessarily agree on everything. And that's fine, and that's really the way it's supposed to be. But we did agree on a lot of things, and we were able to, and we still work together very well. I enjoy working with Senator Fatman. He is with Hopedale and Mendon, so I get a chance to work with him and his staff on those towns, and then of course Senator Roush with Milford, and the same thing. I don't agree with all of Becca's stances on things, and we've had discussions on stuff, but we do agree on a lot, and we certainly work together very well.
But it comes down to, what was it, Reagan and O'Neill?
Right. Yeah.
I can't think of two more diametrically opposite views of the world. But when they were done haggling, they would sit down for a drink.
Absolutely, and that's really the way it's supposed to be. You can have your differences and you can have disagreements, and the idea is to work together to work it out. And through the push and pull, through the exchange of ideas, ultimately a path comes forward that has input from both sides. And to me, those are the best solutions.
Because even on the FinCom, we've got people that are very, very liberal and people that are very, very conservative. I appreciate having both, because both of them look at issues in a way that sometimes just amazes me, because I'd never even thought of it.
Sure, exactly. And that's the whole idea about having, an exchange of ideas and different points of view. And, like I said, through that process, I always think you get the best solutions. So, and that's a big part of the legislative process, which folks don't understand, everything takes so long. Well, a particular bill gets filed, and then it goes off to a committee. So, for example, if it's a public health bill, it goes to the Joint Committee on Public Health, and they'll have a public hearing on that bill. Now, all of the different people that are interested in that bill will testify either in person or they can present in writing. And there might be different ideas about that particular bill. So the committee can take those ideas and it can say, you know something, this is not such a great bill. We should just put it away for a while and you know, maybe
But
think
some
about it
bills
next term.
you don't want to be quick. I mean, uh, this what's it called? Sexting. Now, realistically, child pornography, pictures of naked kids that are kids, 15, 14, put them away forever. But it was a 14-year-old who did it. So, you know, the gut reaction of just, come on, Brian, you can answer that question in 30 microseconds. What's going on? I mean, you got to really look at that deep because
Yeah, yeah. So we the House actually just passed a revenge porn sexting bill a couple of weeks ago, I think, and now it's off to the Senate, and it clarifies that so that underage kids that you know get involved in that kind of activity, you know, they don't have to face felony charges that could have very serious consequences their entire life. The bill allows for a diversionary aspect. So these kids would be sent off into different types of programming, education, you know, that kind of stuff, divert them away from the criminal justice system. The bill also expanded the grounds to get harassment injunctions against spouses for coercion and not only just physical attacks or threats for physical activity, but mental duress and mental coercion. So that's another grounds that the court could take into consideration in issuing a anti-abuse order. So that was all part of that bill, and that particular bill was a group of bills that got put together, and they were in prior legislative sessions, and it took time for those bills to go forward and kind of gel and come together. So the legislative process, you know, can take time, but the idea is to get all of these different ideas on a particular topic and try to put together what makes the most sense.
you know, and I think through, and you say, well, there should be consequences if you texted a naked picture of your schoolmate. Yes. But when you're 13, 14 years old, should you suffer for the rest of your life? I mean, not that we ever did anything wrong when we were teenagers,
Yeah.
but you sit there and say, there's got to be somebody taking a longer view.
Yeah, it's a recognition that, you know, again, young people, you know, particularly with the developing mind, you know, like you said, decisions don't always get made, you know, as well as they could have. So when you take that, weigh it against the consequences that were there, which was very punitive, you know, felony offenses, you know, sometimes the crime doesn't fit the punishment. So in this particular instance, so if you have an underage kid, a child doing that, a diversionary program is going to be available.
No, and that,
But this has to get passed by the Senate too, so it's off into the Senate now, and then of course the governor.
but again,
will
I'm
decide.
glad that it's going through its due diligence, that enough people are looking at all the options, because taking a 13-year-old and not making him a felon, not making her a felon, how do you're labeled, you're stuck there for the rest of your life.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, you're exactly right. You know, so that was the consideration with that particular bill.
Now, speaking of kids, we're getting more kids in Milford. I understand the Best Western has got 50 families.
Yeah, so that's a shelter, that one of the emergency shelters that the governor's office set up there all throughout the Commonwealth. I think there's about 90 or 100 different locations throughout the state, and they're changing. So it's an attempt to try to deal with this immigrant issue that we're having really in Massachusetts, but really throughout the country. And the hotel, I think it has about 60 rooms, 50 to 60 rooms. It's filled. It's filled with families. We get reports at the town from the administration. It's all coming through the governor's office. And the kids that would go to school in Milford, the children, we are getting, all the communities that have kids in these shelters, they get extra added reimbursement through DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to consider the added costs. But one of the things, and we were talking about a little earlier, it's difficult on the school systems because the folks in these shelters can change. So a family could be there December and then January they're gone. A family could have ties to another community, and the child could be in Milford but go to school in Marlboro. So it's put a lot of stress on the school system. The governor's office recognized that, and that's why the added funding component specifically for schools is in place.
Because originally, when they said there's going to be 50 new families, now we've done well by the hotels. We've got 7 hotels in Milford, and we've been getting $1 million plus a year in, I don't know what they call it, that tax.
The hotel tax.
Hotel extortion tax.
Yeah.
I remember when that first came out and the state gave us the option of increasing the local meals tax
Right.
and the hotel tax. I was all for the hotel tax because every time I travel somewhere, it's state extra tax, county extra tax, city dog tax, cat tax. I think in New York City it was like 30-some% tax on every
Really?
room. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I didn't like the idea of the restaurant tax because that's us. I mean, who eats in Milford? We do.
Right.
Milfordians.
Right.
I don't know of many people who are Milford that rent hotel rooms in Milford. And if they do, they don't talk about it. You think about it.
Right.
You may have a family part of your family comes in for the holidays once a year.
Right.
But that was over $1 million that we were getting, that we are still getting.
Yeah.
For the hotels. So losing one hotel hurts, but we've done well by it.
Well, and this is difficult to monitor, but the representation from the administration was that at least 90 days of the hotel tax was going to be paid. I've talked to Zach at the finance department in Milford. It's difficult to track that. We don't know if that actually is the case. Revenues are up on the hotel, but that was a representation in terms of the hotel tax. And other than that, the impact to Milford, certainly financially, is
Well, it hasn't
not
been too
there.
bad right now because when they originally said 100 new kids, well, that's half of an elementary school
Yeah,
or a third of an elementary school.
a grade,
So,
a grade.
A grade.
Yeah,
You say, oh my God, but it turns out so far only half those kids are going to Milford. Like you say, I got my aunt in Marlboro, so I got cousins
right,
in Franklin.
right.
So it hasn't been as heavy.
Yeah, so when we got notice that they were going to open the hotel as a shelter, but I think back in November, I think it was before Thanksgiving, I organized with the town and the state a walkthrough of the hotel, and I wanted to have all of our departments there. So we had the fire department, we had police, we had building, zoning, health, town administrator was there, Paul Mazzucchelli, chair of selectmen, but also on the health board. And the idea was to go through the hotel. At that point, there were minimal amount of families there. I want to say under 10, maybe 10 to 15 families were there. And I thought it was important to get a view of the site. We wanted to meet with the owner of the hotel and just to see what the operation was. There were 2 National Guard who were kind of supervising the area, and we got a chance to, I don't want to say inspect, but at least look at all of the different rooms. We're concerned about any type of health or fire safety. We want to make sure there was no hot plates or other things in rooms that could cause situations. And eventually, really just kind of did a full walkthrough just to get a handle from the town's perspective as to what we were looking at. And from that point, I know the health department has been working closely with the owner of the hotel. We've had some issues around the dumpster and trash removal and that sort of thing. And it's been taken care of, but it's a constant monitoring.
Well, I would think for the hotel this is a great deal. They get all their rooms full. They're not worried about getting paid. But like you said, people forget that these are people in these rooms. If you put them in a normal little hotel room, there's not enough outlets and not enough power for microwaves and hot plates and
Yeah. So the state delivers food to them. I believe it's 2 meals a day. They have food deliveries there to the people. So that's working out well. Transportation is provided by the state, I believe, for medical or whatever. And the goal from the administration is to try to get them work permits as soon as possible so that, some of these people can get into the workforce, transition out of the shelter system, and be able to have a place of their own.
It's hard for me to understand. We can't hire enough people for the Dunkin' Donuts, and all you see is help wanted. We went into a restaurant the other night, and a third of it was empty, and they said it would be half hour. And I looked, I said, well, can we sit at one of the tables? They said no, because we don't have enough waiters.
Right.
So it seems like you got a group of people who want to work, a group of people who want to hire them. What's the difficulty?
You got to make the connection. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the goal at this point through the administration, to try to do that, to get those work visas allowed. And I think at this point they said there's been over 3,000 of them that have been authorized in the last few months. So they're doing everything they can to get those approvals and get those folks out into the workforce. Like you say, there's a lot of businesses that are looking for employees, and folks like this that are coming into the country. Those are jobs that they can fill and can help them.
Crime. Up until a week ago, it wasn't on the mind of a lot of Milfordians. Now all of a sudden we've had 2 robberies. How, in your mind, do our laws in Massachusetts stack up? Are they strict enough?
Oh, I think the laws are fine. It's just the activity that's going on right now, and this kind of activity. So you had the robbery at the Brazilian market down near Sacred Heart, and I think the thing to note about that is, our police department had all 3 perpetrators in custody within the week.
Within days.
So Milford has always had a very active, dedicated police force. Crime, unfortunately, it's not a new thing. And you'll remember going back, we had some incidents in Milford over the years that was very, very serious. In the early 1980s, Milford Police Sergeant Walter Moose Conley was fatally shot on Route 140, stopping a bank robbery. I remember as a kid, riding my bike. I could be 12 years old, and my parents actually forbid me to go anywhere near the wall by Stacy School, because what we'd consider gangs today, they were all high school kids. And
those were the 8th graders that were cool because they got to sit on the wall.
Yeah, I don't know if too many 8th graders were there. There was a lot of activity there that was not appropriate. Central Street years ago was a very dangerous location. So all through the years, you've had situations to happen, but the community and the police department, meet that adversity, and they've taken care of it like they have here.
But you don't hear about crime not being chased. You hear San Francisco, that unless it's $10,000, we're not going to prosecute. So everybody goes in and takes $8,000 as a gang, each of them. Is it that their laws aren't tough enough, or?
I don't know San Francisco. I mean, I can't, really speak to that. I can speak, obviously to Milford. I think, we've got a new chief, as you know, Rob Tassino. And I find him to be very dedicated, very active, very intelligent. And with that, the force follows. And you've got a lot of good young men and women there that, again, are very active. And you're right, they are pursuing criminal activity in the town. They're not letting it get away. And that's the way you combat that. And that's the way Milford has always combated it over the years through the different evolutions of things that have occurred. And, that'll continue to happen. And I think we've been fortunate also that we've had a number of public leaders through the years on the select board and the finance committee, Al, that have always been supportive of the police to make sure they've got the resources, they've got the training, and they're able to do their job safely and effectively.
Now, are you common on Beacon Hill, or are you an outlier that you come from the town you represent? Because you talk about the Wall, you talk about Central Street. You obviously know this town.
Oh, yeah.
Are most legislators state level from their towns?
That's a good point. That's a good question, I should say. Some are, but then I'm surprised. Like, for example, I'm thinking of my friend from Fitchburg, a younger guy, a great guy, Mike Kazmarek, excellent representative, but he moved to town, and not too long ago. So in fact, that was one of the points I thought about. I said, Mike, I think that's a heck of an accomplishment, moving into Fitchburg and, becoming representative, and he just got really involved. But I don't know that he would have, the history of the town,
or the passion.
Well, no, he's a passionate guy, and he works hard, but again,
You grow up in Milford, you have a passion for Milford. I have no doubt that of Ryan Fatman when he came, of Becca, they care. But they weren't here for their whole life. There's, I hate to say a prejudice, but you're always got a little bit extra feeling for your own town.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it gives you a perspective. I mean, it gives me a perspective because I've had constituents reach out to me about the incidents that you're talking about, and it gives me a little bit more perspective to say, hey, let's just take a pause here. This isn't the first time that this has happened in Milford's history. We faced these problems in the past, and we've overcome them, and it's going to happen this time also because of the people we have in place, the infrastructure we have, and that type of thing. So it definitely gives you a perspective as to how things are happening now. But no, not every representative, has that long time ties to the community.
Well, I mean, you think about, we got Casey Poole.
Yeah.
We got Fino Poole. You understand what Fino means to Milfordians.
Yep.
You know what it was like to first time swim across that endless, the deep end of the pool to the pier.
Yep.
Then find out when you're older that it was only 6 foot deep. But
I remember looking over the wall or whatever it was and looking into the swamp.
The pond.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, there's not a lot separating these two waters here.
But see, that to me means a lot, because we don't have to explain to someone like you what it means to Milford. When I hear that a lot of the reasons that our police force doesn't turn over as much, a lot of them are from the area.
Yeah.
That the chiefs were looking for people with ties to Milford. It's the same thing when you look at the Milford Physicians Group.
Yep.
They've made no qualms about saying, if they find somebody with family in Milford, they get an edge up because they're more likely to stay.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. You have that knowledge of the community. Um, so I've tried to work with, obviously, like you said, Becca, Senator Roush. She's asked me a lot of questions about the area. Congressman Auchincloss, who actually we're having come to visit the senior center on February 21st. I think it's a good opportunity for him to meet a lot more people in Milford, and I think it's a great opportunity for our seniors to hear from our congressman, who I think does a great job. But both he and his district director, they contact me regularly, just to ask me questions, like, hey, what's going on with this? What's up with that? And it's really nice to have that working relationship. And it's nice to have someone in Congress who is interested in the community to reach out like that. So, I've tried to, help people. And Ryan, of course, he's been around a while, but still he's from the western part. So, we've always talked about what's particular to Milford, and there certainly are a number of things particular to Milford. So yeah, it's nice to be able to have that perspective and to share it with other officials.
So what do you think the biggest challenge you're going to face this year is going to be?
I think it's got to be the budget. I think we've got to see how revenues, is this going to be a long-term trend now that revenues are slowing? Is it going to pick up a little bit? Because, there have been a lot of add-ons to the budget in the last few years, i.e. the school lunch program. So that's put stress on the budget. We've had the funds to take care of that. There are other proposals that people are looking to do. I don't know if you heard the Senate President. She would like to propose free community college for everyone. So all of those things come with a price tag, and it's great policy, it's great ideas, but we can't lose sight of the bread and butter of what our budget is. Basically allowing our cities and towns to operate, our schools to operate, our roads and bridges to be able to be driven on, things like that. So I think you're going to see some stress points where programs. Folks want to have certain programs and certain policies, but there might be some financial limitations.
Well, the whole idea of free college or free community college, noble idea, not a novel idea, because education has always been something that we want everybody to enjoy.
Right.
But if you make it free, I start wondering how many kids will just, well, it's not going to cost me anything. I'd rather do that than work.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention that, because I never really thought of that perspective, but went to a briefing with the president of Framingham State, and with all the Metro West legislators, which I'm also a part of. In addition to the Blackstone Group and the Central Mass, Milford's in a unique position, and that issue came up, and this was back quite a few months ago. And she raised that issue. She said, we really think that the student needs to have some skin in the game to really be driven to take it seriously and to pursue that education. So it wasn't really a university. I would have thought that college, oh yes, great, please, yeah, we don't want to fight to collect money or anything. But their perspective was that you need to think about this for a second.
It's just like our president saying, I'm going to forgive all your loans. And I sit there and say, great. One, where's the money coming from? But two, wait a second, are you fixing the root cause?
Right.
In my mind, when I graduated Holy Cross, it was $6,200 all in.
Yeah.
It's been going up 10% a year. And I remember having the discussion with the president of Holy Cross one night. We were at dinner saying, I thought you were a well-educated man. And he looked at me and said, excuse me? I said, I just got a letter from you. The first paragraph was all the steps you're taking to control costs. And then you used a sentence that seems totally disjointed to me. And because of that, tuition, room, and board will only be $60-some thousand. I said, how can you use the word only and 60-some thousand in the same sentence?
Yeah.
And to me, he was all excited that he was going up, only raising tuition and room and board 5.5%. I said, that's twice inflation back then.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I sit there and say, it's all well and good to say I'm going to forgive all the loans for people who have them now, but next year there's a whole new crop.
Right.
What do you do for them?
Right.
And-
Yeah, and to your point, you're right. It's not getting to the root cause. Why is college so expensive? Now, in terms of the student loans, and I experienced it with my kids, I didn't like the fact that the interest fluctuated, and depending on when you took it out, and it gets raised. I mean, I think if you want to take a look at the student loan program, you try to lock in the interest, make it as minimal as possible, and keep it at that level. Like I said, the forgiveness, it seems like a kind of a one-shot Band-Aid that's going to help a segment of folks, but then what about others?
What about the next year and the next year? I mean, right now, when I see private schools around here, they're all about $80,000 a year. When we graduated, we may have graduated with $32.80 in our pocket, but it was my $32.
Yep.
I could then go out and see what it cost me to buy a house, get a car. If you're coming out with $150,000 worth of debt, how do you even think about a house and a car?
Right. Right.
Now, part of it, I love the idea that my kids move back home. I'd love to have them with me forever, but that's not healthy for them.
Yeah.
And you sit there and say, we've got to deal with the cost of education.
Yep. Absolutely, and that's got huge, like you said, economic ramifications, and it's going to be, like you said, shutting out a whole generation and maybe even longer of those kinds of opportunities.
I mean, how can you? I mean, I don't know what the price of your first house was. Mine was $72,000.
No, yeah, no, mine was 180, I think. Well, we're still in the same house we bought.
Well,
yeah,
but
it was
even 180.
Yeah, that we bought it in '87.
If you added 150 of debt on top of that, makes financial conditions a whole different picture.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, housing is another huge issue that's going on. The governor filed a housing bond bill that we'll be looking to take up this year in the legislature. We've got to expand housing opportunities across the state because there's just not enough inventory, and it's subsequently just raising the prices astronomically, both individual ownership and on the rental end.
Well, but again, what stuns me is we're going to have low-income housing. What do you mean by low income? Well, below the mean of the area. Okay, that still puts, as you said, that price has gone up to a point that an average blue-collar worker is going to struggle to even play at that level.
Yeah, oh yeah, the affordable housing, and again, that the whole idea is, how much affordable housing can you compel a developer to develop, because it puts a strain on that entity to try to build and make ends meet financially.
Well, if
to
the
do
developer's going to make
construction.
$100 profit on his development,
Yeah,
and you take 20% and you say you're not going to make any money on those, well, that just means the other 80% just went up.
that's one way to do it, absolutely. The other way is don't build the
Well,
affordable. Right?
the other way is don't build.
Right, yeah, exactly, so that's another huge issue that is definitely going to be coming up in the forefront this year.
And I mean, Milford's always had the blessing and the issue of a lot of rental properties.
Yes.
When you think about, well, remember when Rolling Green first came in?
Yeah,
We didn't know what that was going to do to the town.
yeah.
Now, you got how many of them?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why this community was so appealing to immigrants is because of the large volume of 2- and 3-family houses, which are relatively inexpensive. That was the attraction point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing because back, I can't think, it was a number of years ago, I'm getting too old, we talked about Laurelwood in Hopedale,
Yes.
how all those 2-bedroom condos have no kids.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, those 2-bedroom condos that they're making now are being filled with kids because you can't afford a 3 or 4 bedroom.
Probably, yeah. The whole landscape has changed, absolutely. So, the idea at the state is to try to incentivize and encourage more building. And hopefully with that, even if you're not requiring an affordability quota, just the sheer increase in inventory hopefully ought to
Will
drive
keep it-
prices down.
It may not drive them down, but it'll keep them from accelerating so much.
Hopefully. But that's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
And it's tough because years ago I had Paul Abadanza.
Yep.
I asked him, I said, for every dollar I bring in as a town from residential, what does it cost me? He stunned me when he said $1.80. Because, you get these new homes, everybody's excited, we're going to get all this tax revenue. But you got $15,000 per kid, and each house has 2 kids.
Right.
So the average Milford home pays $6,000. Well, 2 kids eats that up real quick.
Yep.
And what saves us is when he told me that commercially it was like 18 cents. Because 60% of our budget's school.
Yeah.
Businesses don't have schools.
Right.
Now don't have kids.
Right.
Fire, police, all the things that drive up the budget, the commercial people are paying for it, and they got a 50% dual tax rate. So in a way, Milford's very lucky that we've had the dual tax rate and the businesses have stayed with us.
Exactly. That's been the saving grace. And I think it goes back, it sounds crazy, but I think it goes back to having 2 exits off 495. It's a very accessible area, so businesses want to come here because they can go off and do the things that they need to
Well,
do.
you remember when we were growing up, nobody will ever develop Fortune Boulevard.
Mm.
It's all granite. Now look at it.
Yeah,
It's the saving grace of Milford is all that business.
it really is, and that's the thing that's kept Milford financially steady and really in an advantageous spot all throughout the years consistently.
And it's made it affordable. Because when I look at houses in neighboring towns, they're not paying an average of $6,000 of property tax.
Oh, no.
And friends of mine are paying, 40, 50. And I love when towns compare themselves to Milford.
Yeah,
Our rate is the same as Milford.
yeah.
But you have children. You want them on a school bus? It's $400 a piece. Or the towns with the designer trash bags. I remember once when Lexi, my oldest, was living in Worcester. She brought home her trash. And I was like, what's with this? Well, it's $3 a bag if I put it in my house.
Oh, there you go. See, sure.
It was like, okay, we're stopping this noise. But as
Good.
always, thank you for everything you do. It takes a lot of work that some of us see, most of us don't. We all get excited when you bring in home the earmarks.
Yeah,
But the earmarks are the tail on the dog. The work you do overall to get us our extra $7 million for the kids, that saved us. So far in Milford, we haven't had to use profanity like 2.5 override or debt exclusion.
right.
But it's all because of that work and the extra funds that come in. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, it's hard because everything could be better. Everything could be cheaper. Everything could be faster. But as we went through the sexting law, some things you don't want fast. You want real thorough thought, even though it seems obvious. Quick would work. It doesn't always work. But overall, because of Brian, Becca, and other people like that, we've done okay in Milford, and we'll keep doing okay. So to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining in. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than tonight.